on my mic. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. So, flag salute. Actually, do you want to do the flag salute?
I will.
since
I'll be
Sabrina's not
happy
here?
to.
Thank you.
Will you recite with me, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, and can we get a roll call?
Yes, Committee Member Anderson. Farmbach.
Farnbach, here. Sorry.
Nunn. Here. And Wilson, Chair
Here.
Wilson, Vice Chair.
Thank
And
you.
we have 2 excused absences from committee, or Chair No, and Committee Member Uriarte.
Excellent, thank you. So public comment, a total of 30 minutes is provided for members of the public to address the committee on matters not listed on the agenda. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Public comments may be made in person at the meeting by submitting a speaker card to the committee secretary. Speaker cards will be called in the order received. All audio and visual use is prohibited. Public comments may also be submitted by email for inclusion into the record. Email comments must be received prior to the time the item is called for public comments and submitted to the Old Town Advisory Committee at Temecula.gov. All public participation is governed by council policy regarding public participation at meetings adopted by resolution number 2021-54. Do we have any public comments?
We have received none.
Okay, thank you. Consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one roll call vote. There will be no discussion of these items unless members of the committee request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. A total of 30 minutes is provided for each member of the public to address the committee on items that appear on the consent calendar. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Public comments may be made in person at the meeting by submitting a speaker card to the committee secretary. Speaker cards will be called in the order received. All audio and visual use is prohibited. Public comments may also be submitted by email for inclusion into the record. Email comments must be received prior to the time the item is called for public comments and submitted to Old Town Local Advisory Committee at Temecula.gov. All public participation is governed by council policy regarding public participation in meetings adopted by resolution number 2021-54. Do we have any things for the consent calendar?
The approval of the minutes.
Okay, can I
If we
get
could
a
have-
motion to approve the meeting minutes from February 27th?
Motion to approve. I'll second.
Thank you. Motion passes. All right,
And
moving
a
on.
consensus from all.
Oh, everyone in agreement? Aye.
Aye.
Item
Anyone op-
passes 4-0.
Anyone opposed? All right, let's move on to the business. Members of the public may address the committee on business items that appear on the agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. Public comments may be made in person at the meeting by submitting a speaker card to the committee secretary. Speaker cards will be called in the order received. All audio and visual use is prohibited. Public comments may also be submitted by email for inclusion into the record. Email comments must be received prior to the time the item is called for public comments and submitted to the Old Town Local Advisory Committee at Temecula.gov. All public participation is governed by council policy regarding public participation at meetings adopted by resolution number 2021-54. So our first item is to receive budget engagement session. So can I call Caitlin Dorset? Thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Let's see. So good morning. I'm Jennifer Hennessy, and I'm the Director of Finance here. And this morning, we're going to walk you through our budget engagement session. So this is a step that we make in our budget process where we meet with all of the different commissions of the city, and we provide an update on our current fiscal status. We give you sort of a highlight of our general fund and Measure S funds, our capital improvement program, TCSD. We're going to provide an update on a strategy that the council has been commissioned us to do a few years ago, which is to pay down all the city's debt I'll give you an update on that. And then at the end, we have a fun little survey that we will do. It's real-time, interactive, so just designed to be a little bit of fun. So again, I'm Jennifer. I'm the director. We have our budget team with us today, minus one member. So Ward Comer's our assistant director. He will present as well. Paula Majors, our fiscal services manager, is unfortunately not here today. She oversees the capital improvement program budget. And then we have Catlin Dorset, our management analyst, who oversees the annual operating budget. And I will turn it over to Catlin to start you on the budget cycle overview.
Good morning. My name is Catlin, and I'm going to walk you guys through the budget process for our annual operating budget and our capital improvement program.
Perfect. Sorry for mispronouncing your name.
It happens all the time. It's all right. All right. So in January, we kick off our budget cycle with reviewing the expenditures and revenues for the current fiscal year to determine if we need more or less budget to get us through the remainder of the year. This is known as our mid-year update. At this time, we also forecast out the revenues for the coming fiscal year, and we create a 5-year projection, which serves as the foundation for the next year's annual operating budget. In February, the City Council approves those mid-year updates, and departments will all submit their budget requests for the coming fiscal year. In March, we hold our budget engagement sessions with all city commissions and committees, much as we're doing this morning with you. And we have meetings with all of those departments to review their requests. In April, we develop the proposed operating and capital budgets. In May, the City Council, we will hold our budget workshop for the City Council to review the proposed budgets. And at a later date in May this year, the City Council will adopt the final operating and capital budgets. And finally, in June, we will distribute the physical and digital copies of the adopted budget books. The process for developing our annual operating budget is 3-part. First, we look at the economic forecast, local trends, take into consideration consultant recommendations, and look at prior year carryovers to compile our revenue projections. Then we create our operating expenditures, which consist of personnel requests, operations and maintenance costs, and capital outlay items. Capital outlay items are generally non-reoccurring equipment or vehicles, for example, that do exceed $5,000. And lastly, we incorporate the performance measures, which all tie back to our quality of life master plan, our departmental narratives, which are each department's services, goals, and accomplishments, and fiscal policies to create the final annual operating budget. And there's a photo there of our current year's adopted AOB. The development for the capital improvement program begins with calculating available revenues, updating existing project cost projections, and adding in any new project requests. Then we link each project to the QLMP, the Quality of Life Master Plan, a core value within that document, and add in any relevant operations and maintenance cost. For example, if a new facility were to be requested, we would add in the costs of the staff that would be required to man that facility and, say, landscape services, things like that. From here, we ensure funding sources are identified for the first 3 years of the project. The CIP is a 5-year projection, wherein the first year is adopted and there is a plan in place for the next 4 years. From there, we add in supporting documentation such as future projects, the index, etc., and that becomes our final capital improvement program budget. And again, there's a photo there of our current year's adopted CIP book. And that's it for me. I'm going to kick it over to Ward Commerce. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Ward Comer, Assistant Finance Director, and I'm either going to bore you or excite you talking about budget projections and economic projections. So if you have a degree in economics like I do, you'll be excited, and you might be excited anyway. Okay, here we go. So one of the first things we do when we're looking forward to building our budget is looking at economic outlook for the coming year. A couple things we look at. We look at the national outlook and we look at the local California outlook. We look at various projections from different sources. Using one example here from the University of Michigan for the national outlook. So They are projecting GDP growth dipping from 2.8 to 2.1% this coming year. Recent news, so these projections are about 3 months old. Recent projections are more like about 1.7% GDP growth. There are some projections that are negative now. So we'll see. It's very unknown. We got a lot of unknown things going on. So they also projected the unemployment rate rising from 4 to 4.4%. They pointed out the inflation is falling, but it's sticky. So if you've been to the Waffle House or a Denny's lately, you might pay the 50-cent extra surcharge for an egg. So things are moving in the right direction, but not as quickly as we would all hope. And then they've mentioned that consumer sentiment is uncertain and people are worried about inflation. So consumer sentiment has been falling fairly dramatically in the last few months. The latest report just came out Tuesday, and consumers are worried, let's just put it that way. So there's different measures of consumer sentiment. Some have it the worst in the last 4 years, some is the worst in the last 12 years. So we're all worried, it sounds like. In terms of the California economy, we look at a forecast by Beacon Economics. Similar to the national forecast, the economy has been showing resilience, but challenges loom, so we've been talking about those challenges. They forecast state GDP growth to be 2.2% and unemployment steady at 5.1%. For our budget assumptions, we use various inputs from different sources. So for statewide sales tax, our consultant HDL provides us with projections. We've had 2 down years in a row of sales tax, so negative 1.3% and negative 0.8%. For the next fiscal year, they're projecting 2.6% growth for sales tax. For our budget assumptions, we're assuming 2.5%. For property tax, again, we use HDL for our consultant for that. They are projecting 4.58% growth in taxable value, 4.37% growth in property tax VLF, and we're assuming 4% for the budget. Property tax is fairly stable as long as we don't have a correction like we did for the housing crisis. That should be a fairly accurate forecast. For gas taxes, we get a forecast from California League of Cities. They are projecting 1.9% growth. For building and development, we use our internal sources and we're projecting a 0% growth in development. And then for personnel, we are assuming a 2.3% COLA, and that is contractually obligated. So those are our budget assumptions. Looking at the current fiscal year, the mid-year budget projections went to the City Council on February 11th. This is our revenue. I won't go into all of these, but sales tax is at about 44 million, property tax 11, property tax in lieu of VLF, that's 11 million. Total revenue for the city general fund is 110 million. At the mid-year, we had an adjustment, a small decrease in our revenue projection to 220,000. The chart on the right is a historical look and a projection going forward for 5 years. So the green line, it might look black on your screen, but it's actually green. The green line is the revenues, and the blue bars are the expenditures. So what you want to see on this chart is the line above the bars. So that means we're taking in more revenue than we're expending. So we're in a positive position, and that's where we want to be. And we've been revenues have consistently exceeded expenditures, so that's positive. And looking forward out future fiscal years, we're continuing to project positive revenues in excess of expenditures. Looking at the expenditure side of things for the current fiscal year, public safety, police and fire, that's about 53% of city expenditures. 43 million for police, 11 million for fire. Total expenditures is about $100 million. At the mid-year, we adjusted expenditures to show an increase of $2 million, and that's mostly for some new employees to do fire inspections, and including their vehicles. And then we've had a big increase in our insurance premiums, just like everyone is in their personal lives as well. So the city is not immune to that. Okay, now talking about fund balance, that's basically kind of what the cash the city has in the bank in our savings account. Our reserve for economic uncertainty, we've got 20 million. Our secondary reserve is 5 million. We've got about $1 million that's committed to various things. And then we have available fund balance of 12.6 million. So our total fund balance is about 38.6 million. On the chart on the right, the bars represent the fund balance, and the black line with the yellow diamonds represents the desired reserve. So you can see that in the past years and then the future years, our fund balance is exceeding the desired reserve. So we're in a strong financial position as a city. Just want to point out that if you look at fiscal year 21-22, the kind of the tallest blue bar there, and then it kind of slopes down. That's an intentional, we've done an intentional drawdown of our fund balance to pay off some liabilities, and Jennifer will talk about that in a little bit, but we've been intentionally drawing down fund balance to create some savings in the future. But overall, very strong financial position. Looking at Measure S budget projections. So Measure S is the 1 cent sales tax that was approved by the Temecula voters in 2016. The revenue expenditures are accounted for in a separate fund. And that's so we have additional transparency on the revenues and expenses there. The City Council created guidelines for spending the Measure S funds. And those 4 categories are public safety, asset management, capital improvements, and then community services. If you look at the table below, you'll see that the revenue, like for this year, for example, it's about 40 million, and we've got 10 million going to public safety, 4.5 million going to asset management, 43 million in capital improvements, and those are actually funds that have carried over from year to year for projects that are ongoing. So that's the projected expenditures for this year. And then we've got 17 million appropriated for community services for a total of about 75 million. Down below in the blue bar, that's our fund balance for Measure S. So for this fiscal year, we're projecting about 14.5 billion for fund balance. And then the future years are depicted there. So still a positive position. Looking at the Measure S budget projections, again, because Measure S is a sales tax, the revenue's been down about $1.5 million. Fortunately, it's been offset by increase in interest earnings. So there's been some positive and negative things happening there. The expenditures are allocated mostly to CIP for 24-25, as I mentioned on the previous slide. If you look at the chart down below for fiscal year 24-25, you'll see the big green bar standing there. That's our CIP backlog that the funds are going towards. Going out to the future, however, most of the Measure S revenue will be going towards public safety and community services. So there will be less and less funding available for CIP projects. Looking at TCSD budget projections, again, it's a separate fund that accounts for activities, events, programs offered by TCSD. The funding sources are primarily program revenues, so that's, for example, how much we charge for a class. Measure C, which is a parcel tax on every parcel in the city. And then we have a Measure S, contributes a portion to their funding. Total budget for TCSD for 24-25 is about $21.2 million. That's spread across 13 divisions, and the chart on the right kind of shows the breakdown of those expenditures by divisions. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Jennifer to talk about the capital improvement program. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Sorry about that. All right, so as mentioned previously, so the city really has two budgets. So we have an operating budget and a capital budget. And our capital budget are for large projects such as streets and parks and bridges, anything that's over $30,000 in construction and then has a long-term lifespan. So our CIP budget, or program, is a 5-year projection. It is broken out between the different categories that you see here in that table: circulation, housing, infrastructure, parks and recreation, and then community facility district funded projects. It's the largest CIP budget in the city's history at over $927 million. A very large CIP for a city our size, by the way. 110 projects. There was an additional project added at mid-year, so a total of 111 projects. Of that, $927 million, $629 million we have funded. So that means we've identified different granting funding sources or other city funds to actually fund those projects. And then the remaining $298 million are identified project needs, but we haven't yet identified a funding source. So those projects will not get fully started and completed until we've obviously found a funding source. One thing of note is that we have about 61% of our funding comes from outside of city finances, so that's in the form of federal grants, state and local grants, reimbursements, developer impact fees, things of that nature. So we thought we'd highlight a few of the major projects that are recently completed or underway. I think everybody knows about this one, but the French Valley Parkway Phase 2, that's nearing completion. We're estimating that to be done around May of 2025, on schedule, on budget, $138 million. A very large project, and it's been going very smoothly, and it will help alleviate the bottleneck traffic on the northbound 15 at the 215 split. Pickleball courts, I think everybody knows about this one too. Recently completed in February of 2025. It added 17 courts to an area within the Ronald Reagan Sports Park. Total budget on that project was $3.7 million. The I-15 Congestion Relief Project, so that's the project between Temecula Parkway and Rancho Cal heading northbound on the 15. It added an auxiliary lane. Total project budget on that was $9.2 million. It's the beginning of a 4-phase project where Caltrans will add 3 additional auxiliary lanes, 1 more northbound and then 2 southbound, to help widen out the freeway throughout Temecula. And then finally, the dog park renovation, that was a $1.2 million budget. It was completed back in July of 2024, and that dog park is located at the Mike Nagar Park behind our new Margarita Rec Center. So now we'll jump into a summary of the debt liability paydown update. So as I mentioned, back in December of 2022, the council adopted a policy whereby we were to pay off all city debt and pay down our unfunded liabilities. So our goal at the time was to become debt-free within 7 years, and we are still on track to meet that goal. To date, we have paid off both of the facility loans that the city had. We had a $12.6 million loan still outstanding on this facility, and that was paid off in 22-23. We also paid off $5 million on the Margarita Rec Center, and then we started to pay down our pension liability. We paid $7.25 in the first year, and then we paid another $14.5 last fiscal year. In addition, we also paid off our, what's called an OPEB liability, which is other post-employment benefits, also known as retiree health. So for those employees that were eligible, that benefit was cut off several years ago, but there's still a liability there. So we're happy to say we're now fully funded in our OPEB liability. And then just recently, we paid another $7.9 million towards our pension liability. And then the remaining payments, you can see they're scheduled out through the end of 28-29, at which time our pension, all things being equal, that moves every year, but all things being equal, we will be 100% funded in our pension liability, which is not a very common thing for a city. So that is a lofty goal, but we have the resources currently in place to do that. So that is the direction of the council, and that's what we're working towards. When all said and done, what this does for the city is it will save us over $30 million in interest savings, just the pension alone, over $3 million in the facility loans that we pay down, $3 million in interest, and then our annual savings by paying down all of these liabilities and debts, it will increase our annual budget by about $5.8 to $6 million a year ongoing. So that's the benefit of paying down, sort of like paying off your mortgage early. That's really the same type of concept. So this chart kind of illustrates the payment plan versus what our required payments were. So if you look at the green bar, that's our actual payments that we've made. And then the black that turns into the orange, that line is what our CalPERS required payment is. So in the current year, we pay $10.4 million. Our requirement was only 5.6. So by accelerating that payment, we go down to a zero payment by 29/30, whereas if we were not accelerating our payments, we would continue to have to pay 6.9, and then it slowly goes down, and by fiscal year 44, 45, that's about when we would have it fully funded, according to PERS schedule. Before we jump into the survey, are there any questions on any of the financial stuff or the debt paydown strategy or anything? Yes, ma'am.
With regard to the widening here, right now the backlog coming from San Diego to try to get in to Temecula, the traffic starts about Bonsall, and it takes probably an hour to get from there. Will those 3 lines reduce that backlog and eliminate it, or are there future plans to continue to have widening or fast track or something for the convenience of those people who need to get to San Diego and back?
I think I will turn it over to our
I can
traffic
take
engineer.
that. I'm Nick Manchilli, the senior traffic engineer for the city. It won't eliminate the traffic. There's still going to be traffic, but this is definitely going to reduce these current projects. I think it's going to reduce a lot of the backlog. Like, I don't expect it to back up the Bonsall, but it should reduce it. Caltrans has other projects I think they're working on. I think there's, like Jennifer mentioned, the auxiliary lane project too, which is going to connect our ramp so you don't have to weave onto the freeway to get to the next off-ramp. All these combined are going to reduce it. I can't say it's going to eliminate it though.
Now, I live in Marietta, and I can leave my house at 8 a.m. and expect it to take me 45 minutes to get from Clinton Keith Road through Temecula. Will that be improved soon?
That one I don't know. That's a Caltrans. The freeway system's a Caltrans issue.
Yeah, I think let's try to keep this just to the budget questions for right now.
That
since
is part of my budget. Sorry.
Well, the transportation part is different, but,
I'd like to continue.
oh, please go ahead.
For your circulation plan in the budget, the budgeted funds, what are you guys planning on improving the circulation? Because I think I brought up last time with those 1,700 homes going up above the way, there is no added circulation. They're going to be using already backlogged streets because they're going to be emptying out onto Winchester Road, Rancho California Road, and Highway 79. Are there circulation improvements being planned in that budget?
I mean, there's various amounts of circulation projects planned for. For instance, Butterfield Stage Road just north of Temecula Parkway. There's a pinch point there. The Paseo del Sol project that's currently being worked on. They're going to be working on that as well, widening that. I mean, there's various projects going on in the city that are aimed at improving circulation. Inez Road widening, we're wrapping up plans for that. That's just in front of the Rive project. There's a pinch point there where it goes down to one northbound lane. Projects that's slated to be done fairly soon. We're wrapping up plans on that. So there's a myriad of projects being worked on. It's just when they come in and when we have funding to build them.
Because I think last time I expressed a concern about if there is a fire and we're all trying to get out of Old Town, how do we do that effectively and efficiently and safely? So that was part of my question. On the housing component, is there more low-income housing being planned for funding with that budgeted revenue?
There is. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, there is. The city has an obligation through the RENA, or Regional Housing Needs Assessment, to fund more affordable housing.
Okay, we can get the details on that separately. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, on the budget for, again, capital improvements, what's allocated for improving parking in Old Town?
Parking in Old Town?
Parking in Old Town.
We do have a capital, you want to go? We do have a capital project dedicated to parking in Old Town. We've done several improvements including the 2 lots out front. There's a project underway to help monitor parking and the frog technology. I don't know if that's been
Yeah,
shared.
and we have an agenda item to provide an update on the frog parking.
Okay, all right, great. All right, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have other questions for our finance department? Nope, I've got a couple. First of all, congratulations on your debt pay down. That is certainly not what's happening in many other California cities, so congratulations. What percentage of your annual operating budget do you put aside for the fund balance?
It's not necessarily a percentage. So what we do put aside is a percentage. We put aside 20% of our fund balance, or of our operating expenditures, into our reserve for economic uncertainty, and then an additional 5% into what we call the secondary reserve. So those are our rainy day funds, if you will, or
Sure.
emergency reserves. And then fund balance is really just a calculation between revenues minus expenditures and then what's left. But out of that pot of what's left, we reserve those emergency reserve funds over to the side. So you could say 25% in aggregate.
So it's not necessarily made for like, hey, if we have another COVID, we're gonna, we've got a fund balance to carry us through for 6 months or whatever.
Well, that's in essence what the emergency reserve
Okay.
could be used for. Yeah.
And then
Important to note, in our last COVID, the city has never once had to tap into its emergency reserves, either through COVID or through the Great Recession. So we've always been able to, reduce our expenditures accordingly to absorb whatever revenue impacts we've had. But that money is over there for things such as that.
That's great. So it's, you had a steady growth of revenue for the future years. Given all the reporting, like sales taxes down, GDP growth, what are you attributing that revenue growth to?
Well, as Ward mentioned, we do rely on our consultants to help us. They have a much broader global view of what's happening up and down the state. And certain things that are going down, certain things are going up. For instance, as an example, gas prices. When gas prices go up, not good for us drivers, but the city does get an additional sales tax from that. So they look at all the different components of the economy. Some things are going up, some things are going down. We do monitor it throughout the year, and as Ward mentioned, these projections were done about 3 months ago. So we're currently in our budget update process right now, so we're revisiting those assumptions, and we can change them throughout the year. So, 2.5% growth on sales tax is what we have factored in right now. That may be a little bit aggressive at this point in time, given the certain, uncertainty of the economy.
Sure.
Sales tax, a tricky one. It's the biggest of our revenue sources, but it's also the most lagged in where we get the actual results about 6 to 8 weeks after it actually occurs. So, we're somewhat lagged in our timeline to know exactly what's going on within our local economy, sales tax-wise. We do look at things like TOT. That's more of an indicator. As fewer people travel because budgets get tight on their own personal budgets, that's kind of what we call a leading indicator. So if we see TOT start tapering down, if we see expenditures on, restaurants and entertainment, that starts tapering down, those are kind of leading indicators that we should be revisiting our global sales tax projections as well. So we keep a very close eye on that and work closely with our consultants for that too.
Any major deficits on the horizon that you're worried about coming up, or you've pretty much addressed those?
No, just in general, the economy it's wonky right now.
It
Not a
is.
technical term, but, so predicting revenue streams in that kind of environment is a little bit tricky. So we just pay closer attention and we read, our local economy reports, the national and state economic reports, just to really try to get a pulse of what's happening out there. And then if we see that some retractions need to occur, we'll go to council and request those reductions in revenue and then offsetting expenditures to keep balanced.
Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer, and your team for that report. And we can move on to the community satisfaction survey.
Okay, yeah, so every few years, about 4 to 5 years, the city conducts a statistically valid survey where we have a polling company do phone calls and outreach to the local community, enough residents to make it statistically valid. And what we're really gauging is the community's satisfaction with the city's services. This chart shows the surveys that have been done over the years, and then our overall satisfaction level. So back in 2001, there was 92% of those surveyed that felt that the city was doing they were either very satisfied or somewhat satisfied with the services the city was providing. That stayed steady over the next 3 surveys in 2007 and 2012, and then in 2014 it blipped up a tiny bit to 93%, and then the last survey that was conducted was in 2021. That was just on the heels or right in the midst of COVID, so it did drop down to 83%. And the city manager's office is currently working with the polling company to create another survey that's going to be going out sometime later this year. But what we thought we would do is give you sort of a preview to that survey. And not everybody gets called to participate in the survey, but here we can do a non-statistically valid version of it real quick. And if you are able to click over to the PC button on your computers, you will be able to see our survey questions, or if anybody else wants to join, you can scan the QR code with your phone and participate. So the first question is, how would you rate the overall quality of life in Temecula? And staff can participate, anybody who wants to can participate, it's just for fun. Okay, and then if you look in the upper right, the top right, it shows how many respondents so far. So we've had 5, now 6, okay, 7, 8, all right, about 75-25. Okay, next question. So generally speaking, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with the job the city is doing to provide city services? And this is that question that was charted in the previous slide. So everybody, so 12 respondents, all very satisfied. Well, that's great. Okay. Okay, so this is a fill in the blank. What are the names of 1 or 2 stores that you would like to see come to Temecula? And you just type in whatever store you can think of there. And so we'll be compiling all of the commission's responses, and we share that with the council at the budget workshop. We've seen a lot of similarities between the councils. Okay, we've definitely seen REI and Bass Pro. Oh, Wood Ranch is a good one. We've seen Whole Foods, yep, Nordstrom. Yep, IKEA. A second Trader Joe's, okay. Boosie Bookies, okay. All right. Well, there's definitely a theme in the Bass Pro Shop, IKEA, and REI. So. Generally speaking, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with the efforts to improve traffic circulation by improving roads and intersections, implementing traffic calming measures, timing traffic signals, and other measures? So this is the city's efforts to improve circulation. All right. Very good. Okay. 12 respondents, so let's move on. What are the one or two things you like most about living in the city of Temecula? All right. Very consistent with past surveys, both from the commissions and the past community surveys. So. All right. Very good. Okay. Hate to ask it, but we got to ask. What are one or two things you like least about living in the city of Temecula? Always number one. Sorry. Sorry, Nick. Oh, okay. Got some new ones on this commission. Okay. That's a new one. Okay, keep going here. All right, if you could attend one signature event each year, which one would you attend? Okay. Pretty consistent. Yeah, the commissions, it's always a tie between either Rod Run or the Christmas Parade. And the 4th of July fireworks ranks high as well. So I think that was our last question. Yep, so thank you for participating. As I said, we'll compile the results and share it with council. Are there any other final questions that you might have for us?
Does anyone have any other questions? Nope.
All right,
Thank
well,
you,
thank you
Jennifer.
very much.
Appreciate it. All right, let's move on to the Frog Parking Pilot Program. Eric Jones.
Thank you. So the system has been in place now for a little over a month, and we're starting to see some data and some trends and whatnot. So just want to share a little bit about what we're seeing so far in the pilot program. I put in the staff report for today, and I'll mention it here. Working on this has kind of required us to learn a whole bunch of new terms that are specific to the parking industry. I just wanted to put the definitions of a couple of the ones up here that I'll be talking about here briefly, just so everyone understands the difference between duration and occupancies and parking sessions. The sessions are how many cars are parked in an area. Each one of those spots is a session, is basically what that is. And then duration, that's kind of self-explanatory. It's how long was it there. So what we're seeing so far is for sessions, Saturdays continue to be the busiest. And you can see that it's really easy to point out the Saturdays. They're the tallest bar graphs there. And the busiest one we had so far that's been checked as of the writing of this staff report was Saturday, February 15th. That was Valentine's Day weekend. So probably a lot of people coming down here to eat and whatnot and do things like that. So that's probably where the spike was there. The other thing that's interesting to note is that most folks who are parking, they're parking for 1 to 2 hours. And you can see that here in this bar graph. The tall bar there, that's the 1 hour, and then it falls down to 2 hours, and then it tails off for farther durations. There are some extreme parking durations. We've got some that are well over 11 hours. The longest one that we've clocked so far was 40 hours. Sitting right there in front of the old Be Good restaurant, that one right on the very corner between Main and Old Town Front. Somebody parked their car there for 40 hours is what we discovered. Also want to talk about some information that came up after I had to turn in my staff report for tonight, but I think it's still relevant even though we're still kind of working through the data, and that is the overall utilization. Now I'm still working with the data analyst at Frog to make this look pretty, if you will, more presentable. But basically what we're seeing is we're never, on an average basis, we're never going above the 85%. Now there's peaks that go above it. There's certain, hot hours that go over that. But as a whole, we're kind of right around 50% or so. And I put the little red line, that's the 85% that goes through there. So we thought there's going to be times where it's 100%, but it's never been that in these 88 spaces that are being studied. So that was very interesting to us. We thought for sure, you get on a weekend or something, it's going to be jam-packed, but it's not. Now, there are some peaks that go over the 85, but we're never hitting that 100. So that's what this graph here is showing us. So that's some of the data that we're starting to get out of the system now. We're continuing to work with that data analyst at Frog. He's out of New Zealand, so we have to account for the time zone and whatnot when we work with them. But yeah, the data is starting to show some interesting results for us. That's pretty much my presentation. If you have any questions.
Great. Does anyone have any questions? Please go ahead.
Just one observation, and that is the parking spaces were all along Front Street,
That is correct.
not necessarily in front of or around the residential apartment buildings and things like that. So if that survey area were to change, are you thinking about changing to monitor the hot spots that
Sure.
you know exist?
Yeah, and just to remind the committee, we're in the pilot program right now, and we chose that area working, with Frog and working with traffic to say, okay, this should be a good area for us to study, and the real reason behind it is we need to make sure the software does what we want it to do before we roll it out to the other portions of the city. That'd be phase 2, and the council has to give us permission to go to that phase 2. So right now, we're just trying to see, okay, here's what they said it would do. Is it doing it? Do we like it? Before we do that full investment of a phase 2. And certainly when phase 2 comes in, if it does, it will include all the public parking spaces in Old Town. So all the streets along the residential, like you're talking about, they're all going to get censored.
I believe this program is also in part to decide whether or not to put in parking meters. With the revenue and the city of Temecula so plush, why would we put in parking meters?
So right now, our whole focus on using this software is just to collect data. If we ever got to a point where that was going to take place, that's a decision for the council. That's not a decision for staff. We are merely here with this system to provide the data and then let the decision makers decide whichever way they want to go.
Yeah, I'll add to that. That's a policy discussion that would be done at the city council, but the Old Town Local Advisory Committee would provide input on that decision-making process.
Any other questions? Nope. Thank you. And then Eric, you're doing the next Vine Creek project as well?
Yes, I am. Oh. Yes, you've undoubtedly noticed the construction on the other side of Pujol with this large development, so we just thought it'd be good to come in here and let you guys know what's going on and where things are at with it. So just a little history on that project. The project consisted of 4 different applications. There was the development plan, tentative parcel map that did a minor exception for the parking, and also a certificate of historical appropriateness because the specific plan indicated that the old train round table is probably on that site. Project, as you know, obviously currently under construction, and they're looking at finishing somewhere around September, October, being done with the construction phase. It's important to note also that the city does have an investment in this project of about $6.7 million. It's all affordable, 60 units. Then you know where the project site is. It's right there in the red box. And then just to kind of take you through it a little bit, here's a site plan. The access points are here. The 2 large arrows on the extreme left and right, those are the drive outs for cars. And the 2 arrows in between those are pedestrian access points. These are the 2 structures. You have building A there along Pujol. And then you have the larger one in the back that's along the creek. And then these are the different amenity areas. They've got a tot lot, they have a pool, little open kind of grass area and whatnot. And then here we have some elevations. This is what it's going to look like along Pujol. In the back building, we have here, these are the elevations that are going to be more along the creek. And these are really important elevations for us because when you look directly across the creek, you're staring right at the community theater. So you've got a lot of people there, a lot of city events. It's nice to be able to look across and have a really well-designed building. So that was a big focus for us, was to make sure the back looked great as well. So it's also somewhat bordering the old Butterfield Stage Overland Trail. And we wanted to find a way to commemorate that trail for visitors that are out there. They understand the history of the area there. So we actually came up with the developer to come up with a sign that describes the events. And actually, Temecula Historical Society, committee member Farmbach actually wrote what's going to be on the sign. We just have to work with the applicant now on what is the actual design, what's it going to look like aesthetically. I did provide all the language on the sign if the committee wanted to hear it, or we don't have to do that, but that's essentially the update of what's going on with Vine Creek. There's actually several more slides after this because it was a lot, but very informative. There's actually one more after this. That's the conclusion of my report.
Nice. Good job.
Yeah, Rebecca wrote it. Thank you.
Perfect. Any questions for Eric on the Vine Creek project? Please.
I have a question. How is it that the city has a part in that project? I had thought it was a private enterprise only.
It's an affordable project, so, you know, when you go affordable, it opens up a whole other ball of wax for things.
Thank you, I understand.
Anyone else, please?
Can you explain exactly where this is located? So you
Sure.
said it was Pujol Road. Is it behind Old Town? Is it near Altair?
Yeah, if we pull up the, if I get my presentation back up.
It's right on the creek walk.
Oh, okay. Do you see the bridge right here?
So,
And it's right.
yeah, right here is the community theater.
Oh, okay.
You know where that is, and then just directly across the creek
Perfect. Thank you.
there.
Any questions, Carleen? No. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Advisory committee reports. Do we have any advisory committee reports? Nope. All right. Community Services Department report.
going to do my best to fill in. Erica Russo, the director of TCSD, had to leave for a meeting, but she did send me an email. Road closures, the Temecula Sunset Market returns tonight from 5 to 9 p.m. And the Mercedes Street and the Main Street Y will be closed from noon till 10 p.m. today. And then additional spring closures will be sent to the City Council on April 8th for approval. So next City Council meeting. And then other Old Town event updates. City Council approved staff recommendations to relocate and combine select special events and discontinue the ice rink, which comes out to 29.5 days of road closures for the year. So if you recall at the last advisory committee meetings, I think it was 78, 80 events per year, and then the closures of the Mercedes Street. That's being reduced to 29.5 days. Council directed staff to present at the Parks and Rec Subcommittee with the goal of having less than 20 road closures, and that subcommittee is scheduled for Wednesday, April 2nd at 1 p.m. And those are all of the updates.
Any questions for Community Services Department reports? Nope. Thank you. Public Works Director report?
There's nothing to report for the Public Works Director.
Thank you. Community Development Director report?
Yeah, I do have a slide for this. This isn't so much an update as it is to ask for your input. Unfortunately, Julie No is not here today. She's the chair and she represents the Old Town Temecula Association, or OTTA. They're proposing to install, similar to Temecula Chilled, lights on the arches and then lights on the street lights. And I have a slide to show what that looks like. Just wanted to ask for your input on the design, and unfortunately Julie's not here, but I think the intent is to do some promotions, perhaps some discounts and other things over a 3 to 4 week period on both sides of the 4th of July.
You can use my computer for the slide. I have it as well.
Coming soon. Perfect, thank you. So there's a conceptual rendering of what they're proposing to install.
And this is paid for by the Old Town Association, or this is paid for by the city?
At this point, there's a request for the city to help offset some of the costs.
Okay.
We're in the budget process right now, so that's being under review. I think right now the feedback we're looking for is really the design.
Look,
Yeah.
any feedback?
I think it looks great. I think it makes it look exciting.
Rebecca? No? Carleen? No? Great, I think it looks good too.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. I don't have any other reports.
Okay, seeing no further business, we can adjourn the meeting unless anyone has anything else? No, thank you.